Hey, I'm Catherine. We're going to do a little bit of a behind the scenes today, and I'm going to talk to you about what it's like to be marketing hire number one for a company when they're growing and they're growing fast. And how do you set up those systems and how do you set up the people and the processes to really make this make sense? So, the company that I was working for is called Avetta, and this was a few years back. They were looking to bring on their very first marketing hire, and that person was me. When I came on, it was a company of 30 people. We had 10 million in ARR, and we had a really complex business process, but a brilliant one. The idea of the company was a marketplace, and it was being able to say, okay, we have people who are contractors and vendors who go on site to physical locations and need to be pre screened before they go on site to make sure that everything is good, that when they go on site, there's no accidents, no incidents, right? You don't want to have any safety rules or issues because OSHA will hold you just as responsible if someone is a contractor or a vendor as if they're an employee and they have an accident. So the company kind of got its space originally in the oil and gas world because that's where a lot of contractors were coming in and needing to be made sure that there had been an audit on their safety rules and requirements, and their people were going to be safe before they stepped foot on a BP or an Exxon Mobil location. So that was kind of the first marketplace, this pool of contractors. On the other side of the marketplace are the clients, the companies, specifically, as I mentioned, we started in oil and gas, who wanted to buy those services. So they're 10 million in ARR. They have 30 employees. It's a beautiful company. Everybody's very friendly and excited to grow, but how do you actually get off the ground and do it? That's the part that I want to dig into for you so that you can kind of take that information and say, okay, well, what can I apply to my own organization? So when I started, we had nothing. We had a database of about 3,000 people. We had gone to one or two trade shows. And this was, I'd say, a company that really worked best off of in-person interactions and relationships, as is often the case with more enterprise sales. So in this dual-sided marketplace, you had high ARR in terms of average contract value for the client side, right? They were going to be spending several $1,000s, call it $20 to $100,000 to buy into the marketplace. And on the other side, the contractors had a much lower ACV, right? They were going to be spending somewhere between like 600 and maybe 3,500 on top level in monthly recurring revenue. So very different, right? One is an ARR motion, one is an MRR motion. So that already was a little bit challenging. What we wanted to do then is really make sure that the model to bring in both sides was as effective as possible. So I'm going to talk about the client side first, and then we'll get into the contractors because the contractors is actually where most of the money is made. So that one's really exciting. But let's talk clients first. So you're coming in as marketing hire number one. How do you make a difference? How do you set up systems and structures and find that first flywheel of growth? Here's how I did it. I started by saying, hey, if we go to events, we can meet people in person. And even if for some reason we didn't get a ton of leads from the event, we'll be able to add those people into our email database and be able to send content to them. So I came in with a structure that said, I want to test first with events. This was a very, hand-to-hand relationship-based type of business, and it made sense to have more of an educational sale in person. So we quickly scaled to 35 trade shows per year. Before that scares you, I'll share that there was a very, very detailed thought process and event playbook that I still use to this day that works extremely well. And I can do another session on what that event playbook looks like for you guys if you want to dig into the details, because I absolutely love it. But suffices to say, those 35 trade shows delivered a strong and steady ROI. Oftentimes, events are actually very overlooked by companies because they don't understand how to do them correctly. So again, happy to share that with you at a later time. But let's just say those events did very, very well. And they also did what I wanted them to do, which was to build our database. So we went in a period of 3 years from 3,000 contacts to more than 100,000 contacts. Now I was able to set up account-based marketing before account-based marketing was cool. In other words, we would go to events, we would contact people before those events, during those events, and after those events, and they would get into our content calendar of email, and now we had a regular way to communicate with them. But it didn't start that way. I started by making sure that the very first thing I did as marketing hire number one was sit with the sales team and truly understand what their pain points were that they were dealing with. So before we even showed up to an event, although we found that flywheel channel very quickly, I had already made sure that the sales team had all of the sales enablement collateral that they needed to be successful, that they knew exactly what to expect when they showed up to a show, that marketing had prepared everything for them. And at that point, it was just required for them to do their best selling at the show. And here's the piece I'll give you as a little tidbit before we maybe do that future event plan opportunity to tell you what that looks like. What I would say is think of your event as 60% of the work is going to come before you ever show up. 10% while you're there, the other 30% afterward. And I think that's the big reason why companies miss on events. So let's just leave that with you. So that's how we created that client side, right? We used account-based marketing. We went, as my husband loves to do, spearfishing, right? We weren't sending out a line and hoping to catch anything under the ocean. We were diving underneath, finding the tuna we wanted to spear, getting the tuna, bringing it onto the boat. We were really understanding our target market and making sure that we created those connections and communication, and that the sales team was enabled and ready to make good on those conversations. So now let's shift over back to the contractors. This was actually the biggest area of opportunity, because what was happening when I joined is that they were leaving money on the table. See, back then, what they would do is when they would hire, or I should say, when they were hired by a new client, you'd have somewhere between 10 and 30,000 contractors who were now available to be part of this marketplace. And that's where the money was, getting that money from those contractors and making sure that they were in the database so that the clients could pull from new contractors if they needed to. So the value proposition, if I were a contractor, was, hey, if I'm inside this consortium, I can be found by the BPs and Exxon Mobils and other companies of the world. Like I mentioned, it started with oil and gas. So what they were doing as an organization is they were just sending out letters to those contractors, and they were helping them to, see information about joining. But there was a massive opportunity there. And the opportunity was to say, hey, if we set up an inside sales team and we start sending emails and making phone calls and make sure that people come immediately when a new client joins, we can get up to 6 months right up front instead of waiting all this time for them to see the letter and take that strategy. So we brought on a huge amount of growth just by setting up an inside sales team. That's another opportunity for another piece later on how to make an inside sales team operate really smoothly. I've got playbooks on that one for you too. Suffices to say, with all of those things, we had some really, really great success being able to create structure and being able to make sure that our messaging was tight, and that essentially the sales team and the marketing team acted as a unit. And if you walk away with nothing else from today's conversation, that's the thing that I think is most important. We focus on growth now in 2026. We don't focus on marketing does this, sales does this, product does this, customer experience does this. That doesn't work. Everybody needs to be on the same level playing field in terms of, hey, we need an approach to go to market. We need to put our egos aside, and we need to make sure that we're making the right growth decisions in order to move this business forward. And that's the piece that really Avetta taught me, and I really enjoyed about being part of that company, was that everybody understood that intrinsically. And so I've kind of taken that into my approach moving forward in general for any client that I work for, which is making sure that we come and solve the big problems as a team. The CEO is responsible for the vision of the organization, right? He or she is not responsible for the growth of the organization, but neither is any one department. Marketing doesn't own that bag. Sales doesn't own that bag. CX doesn't own that bag. Product doesn't own that bag. They all do. So the piece that oftentimes companies are missing is a growth layer. Do you have a way to pull together all 4 of those departments to ensure that you're making the right decisions and making sure that growth is not fragile? What you need is execution, and you need clear decisions amongst those teams. That's the part that's important. And that's the piece that really made a difference and helped this company, in my opinion, get to where they are today, which is that $3 billion sale. It was that understanding of pulling together the right people at the right time to make those right decisions. So I hope that's helpful for you. I hope it gives you an opportunity to go back to your business and see, at a minimum, how can you potentially pull together as a collective those four parts of your company. I promise as you do, you will start to see growth come more quickly and more succinctly, because it is easier when one person or a series of people inside of a collective own those growth decisions. I'm Catherine Gutierrez, and look forward to our next session together. Talk soon.